And wow, a lot of people here. This is wonderful. You kids did a great job. And then look at the banner too. Can I have the right side of that banner? This is over. All right, so I'll just introduce myself. My name is John Perrier, and I'm running for the 35th District Senate seat. I'm actually endorsed by the Democratic Party, but also the Working Families Party and the Independent Party. I was born and raised in Stafford, and still live there today. My wife Debbie is over there. And my daughter Michaela, who actually up until a couple months ago was just living across the street over at the Oaks. She just graduated from UConn and presently has a couple job offers, so we're pretty excited about that. I built my own small business from the ground up in New England Green Homes. Would not have been able to do it without my wife. She actually had her own business at the time, which was an in-home daycare. And she actually took on extra kids so that I was able to save the money I needed to make my business successful. And then eventually she stopped doing that, and then now she's my partner in the business as well. I've been serving my community my entire life. I served as a coach, as a basketball coach, a soccer coach. Smith beat us up pretty bad in soccer, but much bigger school. And I was also on the Board of Education and town selectmen. Oh, in 1 minute? Okay, you said 5 minutes. Okay, thanks.
And as you will see in the front row, there are people holding up tickets. So when the yellow comes up, that means 10 seconds is remaining for your statements, and the red is thumbs up. Mr. Champagne.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming tonight, and I thank the students for putting this together. My name is Dan Champagne, and I'm from Connecticut, a place I love. I grew up in Vernon, and currently I'm the mayor of Vernon. I was on the town council in Vernon for 6 years. I was a policeman in Vernon for 22 years before I retired. And that's a long career, being a policeman. I have a master's degree in public administration that I received from UConn. And I don't keep track of my notes, I'm going to keep tripping on myself, sorry about that, guys. But like I said, I'm currently mayor. This is my 5th year as mayor. And being mayor it brings you into what government is. 10 seconds, I better hurry up. I have a lot to talk about tonight, and as we go along, I hope to convey it all to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Champagne. We will now move on to the next segment of tonight's debate, and we will begin with questions about the economy, more specifically about taxes. Mr. Perrier, the first question goes to you. According to the U.S. Census Bureau and Census of Governments, Connecticut has a combined tax burden of 10.86%, making it the 14th highest tax state in the country. Do you believe that we are getting our money's worth? Do you think that we are using our tax dollars effectively, Mr. Perry?
There's a yes and a no to that question. First of all, we are still in the richest, the wealthiest state, the wealthiest country in the world. And so we do make quite a bit more money in being taxed. It's still much cheaper to live here than it is to live in Boston and it is to live in New York. So as far as being taxed, nobody likes to be taxed, but there are things that we can do. And one of the things that we can do is when we look at our budget, we talk about the master contracts that we currently have. There's 1,045 master contracts that right now do not go out to competitive bid. And we can potentially save $264 million by doing that. And so those are some of the things we can do to actually help the budget. And if we can help the budget, hopefully we won't have to have any tax increases in the future. But in order for us to not to lower taxes, we need to create more revenue. And there's a lot of different, how much time do I have? Anyways, there's a lot of different ways that we can do that. And I'm asking because there's like 5 different ways I have here. But through tax revenue, they had talked about bringing in, some sort of sports betting. That's an option. And they also talked about, potentially the legalization of marijuana. That's something. And there's all these different ways we can actually bring money in. I'm good. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Perry. Mr. Champagne, your 90-second response.
I
I think right now our taxes are too high. I think we spend too much, we tax too much, and we borrow too much. And I don't think if we continue the way we are, we're going to be in a good position. Currently, in this next two-year budget, we are in a deficit of $4.7 billion. That's a massive amount of money. And they're projecting that the biennial budget after that, we're going to be $10 billion. It seems like every other month, that number continues to go up by $100 million or $200 million. We need to start seriously looking at this. You know, we may be the richest state in America, but we're spending our money wrong. We need to figure out a way to keep businesses here. We need to figure out a way to keep our citizens here. And we need to figure out a way to start lowering taxes. You know, when you look at the census, you look at it and it says, hey, guess what? We have the same amount of people. But right now, we have a lot of people leaving. Every one of us know people leaving. One of the biggest things you hear at the door is not if they're going to leave, it's when they're going to leave. And that scares me. Because every single person, on average, that leaves the state of Connecticut, takes with them about $130,000 to $140,000 per family. Those coming in bring in approximately $30,000 less. And understand that's $30,000 on average. We're losing a lot of people, a lot of rich people, and at some point it's going to catch up with us if it hasn't already.
Thank you, Mr. Champagne. Mr. Perrier, your 30-second rebuttal.
So, I mean, Dan's right. There's a lot of things that we have to work on as far as, fortunately, we do have $1.2 billion in our rainy day fund, and it was projected to have another, up to $2 billion over the next 12 months. Unfortunately, we really don't want to rob that if we don't have to. So as far as the 4.7 million that we have as far as a deficit, it's certainly going to take a lot more than just a small conversation here to solve that problem.
Thank you, Mr. Perrier. We have one more question about taxes, and the question goes to you, Mr. Champagne.
Mr. Champagne. Sorry. Mr. Champagne, Connecticut's Bond Commission just recently approved a $10 million study to investigate the future possibility of highway tolls. Do you think that Connecticut should bring back tolls? What kind of impact would the income generated from those tolls have on our state?
Well, when we look at tolls, I sat in on the commissioner speaking about bringing the tolls in and the congestion tolls that they proposed. And those congestion tolls, they want to put a toll booth every 5 miles on every divided highway in the state of Connecticut. That commissioner said that we will be the most tolled state in the nation. We shouldn't have to be at the top of that list as well. You know, if you bring tolls in, you have to bring them in such a way that it works for everybody. And to be quite frank, the way they're presented, it's not going to work. When this whole thing was proposed, the idea was we want to bring the tolls in. If this had passed last year, just the future of these tolls, they were going to borrow $3 billion. Currently, the bulk of the money in the transportation fund subsidizes trains. The second highest expense is paying back debt. And the third highest is everything else. And if we would have borrowed $3 billion, that debt would have increased even more. And it probably would have taken up a lot more room of something else that could have been done. So currently, I'm not in support of this current money. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Champagne. Mr. Perrier, your 90-second response.
Yeah, Dan and I are in agreement there. The current planning, having tolls in all the major cities everywhere, it just seems a bit too much. I think it would be a regressive tax if that's what we chose to do. The only way I would really support any sort of tolls in the future is if we were able to give a reduction in the gas tax, which also comes out of the transportation fund. In Southern Connecticut, when they originally took the tolls out, they ended up raising the gas tax 25 cents. So even if we could lower the gas tax by 10 cents, that would be big enough of a difference where if somebody was able to fill up their tank twice and save a few dollars, and then if they had to pay a 50 cents toll, it really wouldn't be a regressive tax on them. So I would still have to see more numbers and see how things work, but I agree with Dan. In the current plan, I don't like it.
Thank you, Mr. Perry. Mr. Champagne, your segment.
My second rebuttal, it's not really a rebuttal. Mr. Perry agreed with me. But, I guess I would stress, everybody is talking about, well, let's put the tolls on the borders. We can't do that, because if we put the tolls on the borders, we have to pay back the money we got from the federal government since 1984, which is billions of dollars. So even that plan wouldn't work. So we are down to, do we invite them in on the current plan, or do we pay back the government for billions of dollars? We definitely don't. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Champagne. We now move on to the state's debt, and we have a question, and the next question is for Mr. Perrier.
Mr. Perrier, the state legislature recently agreed to bail out Hartford's $40 million general obligation debt. Do you agree with this action? How do you envision Hartford benefiting from Connecticut's intervention?
Well, I don't know if I necessarily agree with it, but I think you have to consider the consequences. Hartford right now is one of the biggest tech hubs in the country, believe it or not. And so we have to look at, if Hartford failed, what would the result of that be throughout the state? For me personally, I know that my interests are more for the 13 towns that I represent than Hartford, Bridgeport, New Haven, because as Pat Boyd said the other night, you guys and your parents are voting for us, not the people in Hartford.
Thank you, Mr. Perrier. Mr. Champagne,
I don't see the state coming in and bailing out towns for their loans. When you bail out the city, and you have to keep bailing them out year after year, especially after they took a baseball team from one city to move to another city and put themselves in debt that way. I think their approach in Hartford is wrong. When you take the money from the suburbs and you move it to the city, and the city's not spending the money correctly, you have to look at how they're doing things. And if it's wrong, it needs to be corrected. When the state comes in and oversees what Hartford's doing, which was a threat, which was never carried through. You also have the MDC, which the MDC had to charge extra towns. Am I 10 seconds or was that a mistake? Okay. The MDC, because Hartford was involved in it and they were afraid they were going to go bankrupt, a lot of the surrounding towns were affected by that as well. And so we're losing money to Hartford in the suburbs, and they're just not correcting what the problem is there. So it's time for them to get line up their ducks, and so we don't have to keep bailing them out.
Mr. Perrier, 30 seconds.
Yeah, as far as the bailouts go, I think, our expectation is we have a crumbling foundation issue here in our corner of the state. And I think, if they can hold up their end of the bargain and they can end up bailing us out, then maybe we need to consider a little bit of a back and forth. And again, I'm not saying I support the Hartford bailout because I don't have the numbers in front of me. I don't want to promise anything unless I see the figures. But those are some things to consider.
Thank you, Mr. Perrier. We now have a question for Mr. Champagne. Again, it's on the state's debt.
Mr. Champagne, with Connecticut's unfunded liabilities, such as pensions and retirement benefits, amounting to $22,700 per citizen, the state's debt seems insurmountable. How do you plan to raise the revenue necessary without further burdening taxpayers?
Well, I think we need to start by actually seeing what we're spending. One of the examples I like to give is 1 mile of highway costs $375,000 in Connecticut. On average, a mile of highway anywhere else costs about $175,000 to do, and that's on average. What we need to do is we need to figure out exactly why. What's causing that price increase? And if it's laws we made, we need to change those laws. We also need to look at other expenditures and how we're spending them or how we're using them. I'm going to go back to what I currently know, and that's the town of Vernon. We look at everything. We find ways to save money, no matter if it's $1,000 or if it's $500,000. I think we need to take the state budget, we need to start doing that. Even if we divide it up amongst all of us and we start looking and saying, you guys look at this department, I'll look at this department, and start breaking it down, finding out where these extra expenses are coming from. And we need to stop borrowing. we're borrowing more money than we should be. We're financing things that we shouldn't. $1 million for a mural? Why is the state getting involved in that? You know, the state's here to fix our roads, to protect us, to supply, you know, the necessary daily life things, not the wish list. I'll end there in 10 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. Champagne. Mr. Perrier, you're on the second.
Actually, can you repeat the question?
Yes.
Dan distracted me talking about roads.
With Connecticut's unfunded liabilities, such as pensions and retirement benefits amounting to $22,700 per citizen, the state's debt seems insurmountable. How do you plan to raise the revenue necessary without further burdening taxpayers?
Well, first of all, they're already doing something about that. They actually re-amortize that debt and pension liabilities to 2048. The problem is that when Roland decided to give the early retirement plans, what that did was it made the budget less for them because people retired. But however, it kicked the can down the road to what's happening is resulting right now. It's something that we should be accountable for in the future, and we need to just keep paying it. That would have been paid off in 2022 had they actually paid into the pensions like they were supposed to. He made the plan, and then he didn't fund the pensions. He only funded about a third. So, you know, and he's not the only one. Rel did an early retirement with ERIPS, and then Malloy did one himself. So 4 of them actually created a lot of these problems. So yeah, that's my answer.
Mr. Champagne, you're 30 seconds vote.
Thank you. Now, one of the other things we have to look at is the pensions themselves. You were talking about some governors that were in Canada. The legislature last year with CPAC came down really too. You know, it's time that we start looking at a serious way to take care of this problem. And part of that would be to, you know, take all the employees into government. Instead of the hybrid system that we created, switch them right to a 403. We have to start looking at medical benefits. Working 10 years and getting medical benefits for the rest of your life, that you shouldn't be doing that. That's excessive.
Thank you, Mr. Champagne. We now have a question for Mr. Perry.
Mr. Perry, Connecticut is facing, as some call it, a business migration crisis, with several giant companies like Aetna and the General Electric leaving because of high corporate taxes. What changes do you plan on making to help keep businesses from leaving Connecticut?
Well, as far as, sorry, what was the first one you said, Aetna and who else?
And General Electric.
Yeah, as far as GE leaving, I mean, they decided to go to Boston. They certainly didn't save any money going to Boston. They had a different plan, but one of the reasons they considered going there was because of the high level of educated talent that they have. We also have that same level here, which is why all the tech companies are moving to Hartford, and the average salary for someone in the tech industry in Hartford is $97,000, which incidentally ranks 3rd, Boston being $103,000 and LA being $101,000. And it's much cheaper to live in Connecticut, so I think we get the better end of the deal with $97,000. So what we need to do is we need to continue growing our educated, talented pool of people here, and then companies will stay. I have a friend who lives down in Florida, and he works for UTC, and he said UTC will never leave Connecticut because we have the intelligent workforce that we have.
Thank you, Mr. Perry. Mr. Champagne, you're next.
Could you repeat the question one more time?
Yes.
Connecticut is facing, as some call it, a business migration crisis, with several giant companies like Aetna and General Electric leaving because of high corporate taxes. What changes do you plan on making to help keep businesses from leaving Connecticut?
We know that involves around taxes, it involves around overregulation. Two of the big things affecting businesses right now. When you think of a business, you know, they're out to make a profit, yes, but they also hire people. It should be our job to try and get businesses to stay here. And we talk about the big businesses, but there are so many smaller businesses. This is something that I've been keeping an eye on for some time now. When the businesses start to leave and the people start to leave, you got to start to worry. I mean, our tax burden is getting higher and higher every year. And businesses, when you bring businesses in, they can offset that. But you got to bring them in so that they can prosper as well, because it works both ways. You know, where I'm currently mayor, we're very friendly to businesses. We try to get them in, we try to provide as much as we can to keep them to stay in there. And if you drive around my town, you'll see that. I wish we could bring in big companies, but we can't. They don't want to come to Connecticut because of the overregulation, because of the taxes. You know, I was just at the Town County Chamber of Commerce before I came here. And it's interesting listening to the conversations there because they're all the same. They're saying the same thing. You know, it's hard to live here. I have 10 seconds. Okay, I'm going to end right there then. Thank you.
Mr. Perrier, your rebuttal.
Well, two things. There are some large companies coming here. Infosys is one of the companies which plans on hiring 1,000 people. And I'm sorry, I forget the name of the other company, but we do have some large companies moving to Connecticut, again, because of the highly educated, skilled workforce we have. But as a small business owner, my plan is to get all small business owners onto the buying power of the state's healthcare insurance, which won't cost anything. But going into a large pool will either give us a better insurance or hopefully save us a little money in the long run.
Thank you. Mr. Champagne, the next question is for you, and it's on, well, it's under the topic of welfare, and it has to do with Connecticut's dealing with drugs. In the year of 2011, Connecticut decriminalized marijuana. Now, the first charge of possession comes with a fine of up to $150. In a person's second offense, they could serve prison time, pay a $2,000 fine, or both. Are these punishments appropriate, or should we follow in the footsteps of states like Colorado and California in legalizing marijuana?
Okay, well, number one, I don't believe in the legalization of marijuana. I've seen some of the damage it does. When you look at what's going on in Colorado, you know, there's a lot more youth that are now participating. In teaching DARE for 10 years when I was a policeman, one of the biggest things people always used to say to me is, I don't do illegal drugs because they're illegal. And just by making them legal doesn't mean it's right. You know, one of the things I heard tonight also was that you can bring in revenue from legalizing marijuana, bringing in revenue from gambling, bringing in revenue from other sources that when you think back 20 years ago, you know, we are the capital of the world in many different areas. And that's where the money came in. When they were moving to decriminalize marijuana, one of the things that was said, the state prosecutors went to the legislature and they told them, nobody is locked up for simple possession of marijuana. And that wasn't listened to. You know, one of the biggest problems they have now when they did this legislation is that they take your license when you're younger. People fight for their license. They fight very hard to keep their licenses. So was it the correct thing to do? I don't think so. We weren't locking people up before because of it. I truly believe we shouldn't rely on that as a source of income.
Mr. Perrier, your response.
Well, there's a lot of advantages to it outside of income. One of the advantages, you take the criminal element out of it. And in addition to that, I think if we were really trying to stop marijuana use in this country, it's been a complete failure. I applaud Dan for the DARE program, and it was a wonderful effort. But after 10 years, drug rates actually increased in every category. So I think when you look at what's happened in these other places, in Colorado, one of the other advantages is that the opioid usage is down. And so it's not just a financial thing, although if you look at what just happened in Washington, they just saved $250 million by releasing people who had been put into prison for marijuana-related non-violent drug offenses. And it has happened here. I know people who've been arrested for it and have gone to jail for it. In fact, just 6 months ago, I was reading in the paper and somebody was actually shot dead over marijuana sales. So there are a lot of reasons to legalize it, and it's not just for money.
Mr. Champagne, your rebuttal.
Yeah, most people that you saw go to jail were dealers of drugs. And they would deal more than just marijuana. They would deal several different types of drugs. And anybody that shot from it mainly would be because they wanted to deal. I have my opinion. My opinion is I don't think we should legalize marijuana. don't think we should legalize any drug. In any country where they've legalized it, they've had to turn around and criminalize it again because it got out of hand.
Thank you, Mr. Champagne. The next question is for Mr. Perrier.
Mr. Perrier, the Connecticut Department of Health states that, on average, 2 people die of drug overdose every day in Connecticut. More people die here from overdoses than in car accidents or by gunshot. There were about 665 drug overdose deaths in Connecticut in 2015, compared to 723 deaths just a year ago. In 2 years of time drug overdose, deaths in Connecticut rose by 8%. How do you believe our state should combat the misuse of drugs?
Well, 4 out of 5 people who are addicted to opioids end up being addicted to heroin. And so we have to attack that problem. Whether we start to go after the pharmaceutical companies for supplying a product that they know is extremely and highly addictive. Because what ends up happening is they get people addicted to opioids, and then their only option is to get on Suboxone or methadone in the future, in which case we as taxpayers are paying for the rest of our lives, the rest of their lives, to keep them on some other drug. So ultimately, that's one thing that we need to do. But in New Jersey, the New Jersey hospital had made a decision that they were going to try and stop prescribing opioids. And they were able to stop prescribing up to 49% of their opioid prescriptions. And the benefit to that is people were just not getting addicted to opioids after that. We did start, and I went and spoke to some hospitals, and we did start to bring some of that here. But it needs to continue. We need to continue to research what options there are outside of the opioids. And we need to stop letting the pharmaceuticals control what happens. We need to stop letting them lobbying with their special interests and manipulating our legislators.
Mr. Champagne, your response.
Opioids are a major problem. They are what lead to a lot of the heroin overdoses and the heroin addiction. The recovery rate for heroin is so low. A lot of times it's less than 20%. And one of the things that I heard recently was something that's happening at Johnson Memorial Hospital. So they're starting to work on a program that instead of prescribing the opioids right away at the emergency room, they find other ways to take care of patients. Now, when I was a police officer, a lot of things that I saw was they would shop different doctors. And what the state did is the state started a program where they could actually track where they're getting their opioids from, and they could put a stop to that. So in a couple sense, we are heading in a positive direction. And I know that when you guys go, or any of us go and get a prescription for opioids, they cut the amount that you receive. In 2008, when I had a shoulder surgery, I walked out with a bottle of 50 pills. I said I didn't need them. They said, I already signed them out for you, you gotta take them. Well, that never got open. It was a waste of money. And finding these other ways, so that, especially with the program that Johnson Memorial Hospital is working, I think is a positive direction to start combating this before people become addicted.
Thank you, Mr. Champagne. Mr. Perrier.
Well, as a senator, I'd like to follow through with my plan, which is to get into every school in the 13 towns and have the kids start their own opioid prevention program and then present it to the middle school kids. I think when I had been discussing this with other kids, the realization is that people are more likely to listen to their peers rather than their parents, police officer, or some guy in a suit. So that's the plan. And everybody seems very positive about it, but I have to become senator to push that forward.
Thank you, Mr. Perrier. Mr. Champagne, the next question is for you.
According to the Northwest Waste Management, it is estimated that 4 trillion plastic bags are used worldwide annually. Only 1% of plastic bags are returned for recycling. Americans throw away 100 billion plastic bags annually. Plastic wreaks havoc on the environment, leaking toxic chemicals into the atmosphere while damaging ecosystems. How do you think Connecticut should approach this issue to reduce plastic waste?
Well, right now we have a serious problem because the plastic waste we're being bought in the commodities market, and when we turn it in, recycling in, we would get a refund for it, and it's sold off and turned into something else. China has currently shut that off and no longer accepts this. So I think we're going to be running into an even bigger problem And I think we need to start looking at this as a state, because we're going to end up with a lot more of this waste going into our landfills, because they're not recycling it, they're not turning it into anything. I think it's about time maybe we start looking at getting rid of the plastic bags. I mean, we've all been everywhere, we've seen them blowing around. And currently, you can't even put them in your recycling bin because they clog up the machines that separate the recycling. Because they need to run one-stream recycling, and the plastic bag gets caught up, it gets wound up in the machine, and you've got to pull it out. So it is the time that we need to start looking at different legislation, talking to the experts in maybe our state colleges, and coming up with a solution to move away from these plastic bags.
Mr. Perrier, your response.
Well, I was at Cape Cod quite a few years back, and we were in a boat and we were going by a little island, and it was packed with a bunch of seals, and I saw one of the seals had a plastic thing around its neck, and honestly it was heartbreaking because you could see that it had been there a long time, and that its skin was folding over it and it was probably infected. So the real solution is they've already worked on biodegradable plastic bags, and it may cost a little bit more to start, but I believe that's the direction we should go in, is biodegradable plastic bags.
Mr. Champagne, your rebuttal, if there is one.
Another idea we could possibly do is look at all these they charge you for the bags. So if the supermarket charges you for the bag, trying to promote you to bring in the reusable bags, maybe that would work. But is there a perfect solution at this time? No, but I think we need to look at several different ones and come up with a long-term solution to keep the plastics out of our dumps.
Would you think it'd be okay to be charged for a biodegradable bag? I mean, I'd be willing to pay for that. Sorry, go ahead.
We talking out of order?
We ask that you guys stick to your sign.
I'd agree with that too.
Well, all right, thank you both. Mr. Perrier, the next question is for you. The College Board Research Center released a study just this year that tuition costs an average of $12,760 a year compared to the cost of $6,336 in the 2004-2005 school year. As college tuition steadily increases, household income continues to stagger. Families find it harder to save. What are your thoughts on how Connecticut should approach this problem? How could Connecticut better support lower income families in affording college?
Well, having a daughter just graduated from UConn, I feel that pain. I really do. I'm just glad that the 4 years are over, to be honest with you. And I know you're feeling it right now, right? But as far as what we can do for that, I just think we need to keep our community colleges open and potentially expand them. Not at the point now where I'd love to say we can give away free community college, although that would be nice if there was an economic plan that made it worthwhile or it didn't cost anybody anything, then I'd be okay with it. But I do know that a lot of kids, especially kids that graduated with my daughter who are very bright kids, decided to go their first 2 years to community college and then transfer to a fine institution like UConn just to save a little bit of money. So as far as having a golden answer for that, I really don't, but I just think kids and parents are making do and finding ways around it, like we always do, because we're Yankees.
Mr. Champagne, your response.
I think we can use some education, maybe in the high schools. And community colleges are great. I started at Manchester Community College. I got my 2-year degree. I joined the National Guard to get free tuition. After I finished my 2-year degree, I moved on to Eastern to get my 4-year degree. So I took it in steps, and I think we should promote that. We should promote the National Guard for free school. We should be looking at other ways that students could find ways to work off the education. Because right now, they're getting out of school with such massive debt, it's not working. I think my wife said it when she said, we either pay now or we pay later. So when we were talking about our daughters going to school, because we either pay for their education now, or they're going to come live with us because they got to pay off all their student loans. And how long we'd be living with us for, even though I'd love to have my daughters. But you know, there's got to be ways to lower the tuition. Maybe we need to do the same thing with our state colleges to try and figure out why the cost so high. I know I was just talking to an employee about budgeting from the university here, and I asked them about their budget, and they said, "What budget?" I just heard it comes, and to me, that's not a budget. You know, and I don't think that's system-wide. I think that is specific to this department. But you know, maybe we need to start looking at that and cut some of the costs, especially for the in-state people.
Thank you, Mr. Champagne. Mr. Perrier, your report.
Yeah, I'd certainly be all for that. I support Dan's idea. I think we could go into school. I know since the state is funding some of these schools, state schools, there'd be no reason why we couldn't go in and find ways to make them run it more efficiently. I don't think that I ever would want to get to the point where we would want to restrict how great the school is doing. But certainly, I'm sure just like anywhere else, you can find waste.
Thank you. We now move to the issue of health care. Mr. Champagne, the next question is for you.
Mr. Champagne, as Connecticut's residents struggle with the cost of living, healthcare costs continue to rise, leading many families to believe that healthcare is simply not worth it. How do you plan on increasing the affordability of healthcare? What role should the government play in providing Connecticut residents with healthcare?
Well, I think one of the things we need to start with is Connecticut right now taxes our hospitals considerably. And I think to a point excessively. And every time we tax the hospitals, those rates go up. And every time we tax the doctor's office more, it goes up. But when I look at the hospitals, you know, currently I'm on the board at ECHM, and we talk about, you know, they were talking about being bought out by a for-profit company. We talked about how much taxes the state of Connecticut charge them, and then it keeps going up. You know, hospitals right now aren't in it for a profit. Usually a lot of those profits would be cycled right through. You know, ECHN has now become a for-profit hospital. And the way they are able to do it is they use vast numbers and they're able to buy things at a cheaper rate. So maybe we can open something up where the hospitals can compete a little more. You know, another idea is they have clinics. And one state started basically paying the salaries of people at clinics. And maybe we can do that, open up, you know, it's a cheaper form, but people can go and get free health care from a clinic or a walk-in center, is what I meant. And by doing that, I think people would seek the medical help. It would be less costly. But you know, there's several ideas we can explore.
Thank you, Mr. Champagne. Mr. Perrier.
Well, this is a huge issue and something I'm very passionate about. Over 40% of the people in this state go with very poor insurance or are unable to afford to actually pay for their insurance, or what they're doing is they're not going to the doctors when they need to. They're not going to the emergency rooms when they have to. It's just because they can't afford it. So as I said before, one of the big plans I have is to get small businesses on the state's health care insurance. One of the other things that I spoke to the comptroller's office about is they're trying to get retired teachers involved in that as well. And I know the municipalities are starting to join. And the bigger this pool gets, the cheaper it will be for everybody. One of the other options I discussed, because as Dan pointed out, the Cadillac plan is somewhat expensive. So Lembo's actually agreed to work on a much cheaper plan for small businesses, and the unions would have to agree to it. But at least I'm making the effort to try and get people insured. Now, if we can get small businesses on there, that's 49% of the state. That's a huge amount of people. If we get retired teachers on there, we get state employees on there, it would be an enormous pool, lower the rate for everybody. It would save the state money, it would save small businesses money, and put more money in our pockets, increase tax revenue because we'll spend that money. 98% of our income is what the middle class people spend. So it's the direction we should go in, we need to go in, we need to get our people insured, and that's all I have, thank you.
Mr. Champagne, your rebuttal.
Joining a large pool would only work if you can get everybody to lower what they currently get. And your idea maybe for a cheaper plan, statewide may work. I think you said you spend $13,200 a year on water insurance for your business. And currently the state employees do have a Cadillac plan, and it's somewhere in the mid-30s that those plans are spent on. So if you can lower it for everybody, maybe you can get there. But I think that's going to take a lot of work with the state employees.
Thank you, Mr. Champagne. Mr. Perrier, we now move to a local issue.
Are we not doing rebuttals anymore?
That was the rebuttal.
That was
a rebuttal, okay, sorry.
But the next question is for you, and it's a local issue. So according to the Connecticut Department of Housing, upwards of 35,000 homes in the northeast and central parts of Connecticut, many of which are in the 35th district, are facing a potentially devastating issue due to the presence of a naturally occurring iron sulfide that is causing the slow deterioration of concrete foundations when exposed to oxygen and water. Fortunately, the state is already working to help those affected by deducting the costs of repairs from their federal taxes as a casualty loss. What do you believe our state government should do to help those with crumbling foundations?
Well, as far as the state government goes, I think we've already made an effort to put some money aside to help. Unfortunately, when we're facing increased deficits, it's very difficult to say that we could afford the billions of dollars that would take up these amount of homes. So ideally, what we need to do is we need to get the 32 towns together, fill out the proper paperwork, and although we may not be able to declare it a natural disaster, we can send it to Congress, and then at that time, we may be able to see some federal funds. Because honestly, when they have catastrophes down at the Cape or what you've seen in North Carolina and in Texas and everywhere else, or Louisiana, we end up paying for some of that. And I know we're already paying more than we're getting back when we pay money to the federal government that's going to those states. So I think it's time that they start giving back to Connecticut.
Thank you, Mr. Perrier. Mr. Champagne, your response.
Thank you. Well, currently, most of the towns have reduced the building permit costs basically to zero for those that are getting their basements replaced. And also the taxes have been lowered, the damage to the value of the houses decreased. Connecticut put $100 million of bonding aside, so $20 million a year to go to the insurance captive, and that money is going to start to be distributed soon. But $100 million for a several billion dollar problem isn't going to work. So what we need to do is, number one, some of the laws have to be changed for the current funding because we've excluded condominiums of more than 4 units, which excludes some very big projects or very big condo units in that district. Number two, we have to reach out to the federal government. Now, a letter, I already signed on to a letter with the other leaders of the towns in this district to try and get President Trump to help us with this issue. And we've been working with the current federal congressman to help us as well. This is a big problem. It's not going to go away. This is going to continue for a very long time. We're still worried about a lot of other items made of concrete in our district, such as bridges and sidewalks and several other.
Thank you, Mr. Champagne. Mr. Perrier, your response.
I'll just say that when I was a selectman in Stafford, somebody had complained about having to pay their permit fees, so I made sure at the next selectmen's meeting we put it on the agenda, and it didn't take long. We discussed at that meeting, they were concerned that the construction companies were going to keep the money, so I came up with a plan where we reimbursed the homeowner specifically, so that didn't happen. So that's one of the things that we need to do, and I'm running out of time, so thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Perrier. At the beginning of this debate, we had a table out front, and the audience members were able to write down questions they had for the candidates, and we drew a question out, and the person who wrote this question down will receive a $25 gift card to Dog Lane. Mr. Champagne, this question is for you, and it is, what can Connecticut, I'll go to Emma for the question.
Thank you. What can Connecticut do to help farms in our district?
Well, right now, farms get a subsidy, And what we need to do is we need to protect that. You know, I visited a couple farms during this campaign, and right now they're in trouble. You know, about 10 years ago, we had about 100 farms. We're down to less than 100. They're not making money right now because monies that were supposed to go to them was swept, and it was taken away. So they got half of the money last year that would have helped them compete against a lot of milk coming in from out of the country and out of the state. And that's just one farm. So as you watch, a lot of these farmers have to get into something else just to survive. So they're selling products on their property. What's happening to farms is happening to our businesses as well. I mean, this is starting to become a major problem across the district. And when we sweep the money that we're supposed to give to them, it's escaping me what the name of it was, but it'll come to me probably 2 questions later. So if we do that, and we keep shortchanging the farms, pretty soon we're not going to have any farms left in Connecticut at the rate that they're disappearing. I mean, it got so bad that one farmer actually took his own life because of what he was facing. So this is a major problem that all farmers are facing.
Thank you, Mr. Champagne. Mr. Perrier, your response.
I think I did a very similar tour to what Dan had done, and I had heard the same thing. You know, we do need to keep the subsidies that are in there in place for the farmers. However, I do believe this is more of a national level issue in the sense that every farmer I spoke to said the tariffs are absolutely killing them. They said they're not able to sell their milk to China anymore. And the fact that the Europeans are just sitting there waiting to take that market. And if they ever do, it's going to be very difficult to get it back. So I would certainly suggest every one of you write to the president and ask him to remove some of these tariffs so we can get that business back, because that's the reason they're suffering. They were doing, the farms that I spoke to anyways, they seem to be doing pretty well, and that's what's hurting them right now.
Mr. Champagne, if you have one here,
Thank you. And, you know, I think with the change in NAFTA, we're hopefully going to see a difference in that, because a lot of the milk was coming from Canada. But that's a national issue. I'm talking about a Connecticut issue. You know, we have a way to save these farms, and I think we should, as a state, move forward to do that. Because local milk is something that I trust in, and I'm hoping that we can keep it around for some time. I mean, just north of us, we have one of the biggest farms in the state, Nellington, which is within our district. Well, it's in the town that we represent. We don't represent the whole town. We need to protect those.
Thank you, Mr. Champagne. We have one final question this evening, and it's just kind of a silly question, but to Mr. Perrier, you can go first, and Mr. Champagne, you can answer this question. It's more of a direct question. What's one thing you respect the most about your farm, Mr. Perrier?
Being a policeman, it's one of the hardest jobs in the world. You know, one of the things, and this isn't about being a policeman, but one of the things I give people credit for is when they're a volunteer fire department. I mean, who volunteers to run into a burning building? It's pretty impressive. And the fact that Dan has been a policeman for a long time, he's had to go into buildings where people could potentially shoot them, and I know people who have worked with him. So I do know that those kinds of things happen. So my respect for Dan is being on the force for 20 years.
Thank you, Mr. Perrier. Mr. Champagne.
Thank you. Thank you. Probably the biggest thing I respect is anybody that puts themselves out there for election. This is not an easy thing. This is my 7th election. And when you get put out there, basically it's funny how many people are your friends one day and not your friends the next. It's sad what people say about you when they don't know you. And I think just stepping up and doing this is hard enough. And I do recommend anybody in the audience here that isn't part of your local government, there's plenty of things out there that you can volunteer for. The Inland Wetlands Commission and numerous other commissions. So we could really use that help. All politicians could. But like I said, putting yourself out there and taking the brunt of sometimes some very negative things, I think really is something that people should look at and understand. It's not an easy.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Perrier, you were the first to speak this evening, so your 1 minute closing statement.
Well, as far as the closing statement goes, I really just want to thank everybody, and this is an incredibly large group. Thank everybody for coming. There's a couple people sleeping in the back, so I apologize for that. Actually, I think it was Dan who came this week, I'm not sure. All I can say is there's a lot of good things going on in Connecticut, and I think that, with UTC, Stanley Black & Decker, Rotten Sub-Base hiring thousands of people, you kids are very fortunate to be growing up when you are. Growing up when I got out of high school, the manufacturing jobs were leaving, not growing, and unemployment was very high. So I will just say good luck, and thank you very much, and make sure that when you get out there, you absolutely love your state, because this is the best state and the best country in the world.
Mr. Perrier, Mr. Champagne, your closing statement.
Thank you. Many years ago, I got involved in politics for one reason only. That's to help. I've been doing it for a long time. I don't do it for titles. I don't do it for anything else. And if I'm elected your governor, I promise everybody here I will never run for governor. My wife said she'll divorce me. Boy, that was a mistake. But I got everybody to laugh. If I'm elected your senator, I will work for the people. That's what I've done for many years, and I will not stop. And I always look at it as what's the best for all the people. And we have a lot of things going wrong in our state right now that need to be fixed. So we can keep our state affordable, and we can keep our families and friends here. So thank you.